Welcome to the Still Curtain podcast. It's Monday, March 3rd, and the NFL draft season is in high gear coming off of the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. I'm Josh Yourish, and today I'm going to break down the Steelers' interest and visits from the Combine, what we learned from their activity in Indianapolis. I'm also going to be joined by the fantastic Cody Williams of the Stacking the Box podcast and FanSided.com to rank our top 10 quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL draft. But first, I want to talk about some veterans and some veteran movement that the Steelers are missing out on. Matthew Stafford is staying put in LA. The 37-year-old quarterback is returning to the Rams on a restructured contract. The Steelers were never one of the front runners to land Stafford. That was the Giants and the Raiders with Tom Brady's mountain meetup with Stafford on the ski slopes. The Steelers were probably not really seriously in the mix to land Stafford, but they should have been. If the Steelers are going to operate as a winning franchise in this moment, a winning team in this moment with an aging roster, and they're going to attempt to win a Super Bowl next year, no quarterback that was feasibly available would have given the Steelers a better chance than Stafford. And that, of course, is why the Rams were never actually going to let him out of the building in LA. Quarterback is insanely valuable. We all know this. I'm not breaking any news with it. That's why I'm starting my foray into draft season ranking the quarterbacks, because that's the most important position and most interesting position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. With Stafford off the board, the Steelers' options are down to Russell Wilson again, Justin Fields again, maybe Aaron Rodgers. But now that Stafford is staying in LA, it seems like the Giants are making a big push to have Rodgers switch locker rooms in MetLife Stadium and join them staying in New York, and Sam Darnold. That's not a great group. That doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. I would have loved Stafford, and I'm still intrigued by Rodgers. I think he's the highest upside potential dart throw that you could have, which is crazy to say of a 42-year-old quarterback, but it's a 42-year-old first ballot Hall of Famer. Maybe there's something left with Rodgers, and I would still like the Steelers to be in contention to land him this offseason. But more likely than not, we're either running it back with Wilson or running it back with Fields. And that doesn't feel very good. This is an aging roster, an aging core. If the plan is to stand pat with a guy like Justin Fields, who would be my preference over Russell Wilson, though the offense was at its best last season with Wilson leading it, I still would prefer Fields and his mobility. If that's the plan, then maybe you should start moving on from some of your veterans. Status quo is pointless for the Steelers. We saw where this roster got them with Russell Wilson and where it would have gotten them with Justin Fields, because the big problem in the postseason against the Ravens, the biggest problem, wasn't even on the offensive side of the ball. While that was a big struggle, the biggest problem was the defense. Status quo is infuriating as a Steelers fan. Status quo will lead to apathy from a lot of the Steelers fan base. I've felt bouts of it already this offseason. It's going to be Mike Tomlin again. It's going to be Fields or Wilson again. It's going to be a first-round playoff exit again. Unless the Steelers make some aggressive moves this offseason, because they're not going to go backwards. They've told us that. Mike Tomlin, Omar Khan, they have signaled that they're not going to rebuild things. They're not going to tear things down. All right, then let's take some swings. One of the swings I would have loved the Steelers to take would have been on Deebo Samuel, but the 49ers hybrid wide receiver running back, he's certainly more of a wide receiver than a running back, but he spent a lot of time at running back, is going to the Washington Commanders for a 5th round pick. This is a lesson in the value of cap flexibility and salary cap health. If you can absorb $21 million, you can get insane value for a 5th round draft pick. It's the magic of a rookie QB contract or a super cheap veteran like Wilson or Rodgers. The Steelers should act accordingly when it comes to guys like Cooper Kupp or Davante Adams, who is on his way out of New York. There are veteran receivers that can make the Steelers better. If the Steelers' plan this offseason is to get better, they better land one of them. I don't love a big swing for Brandon Ayuk. Maybe he'll become available as well, as the 49ers tried to retool things after kind of a disastrous injury-plagued season, and Ayuk was one of those injuries. I'm still not ready for Pittsburgh to move a quality pick, a first to second round pick for a veteran receiver. I don't think that's a healthy decision for this organization to make, considering the state of its quarterback room or lack thereof. But Cooper Kupp, Davante Adams, maybe even Chris Godwin, who could be a high-priced free agent. T. Higgins, probably not. Probably not an option in Pittsburgh. I would love to see the Steelers go after one of those guys. It won't cost a whole lot. The Steelers do have some cap space to absorb an inflated contract for a guy like Cooper Kupp, or overpay a little bit to get a guy like Davante Adams to come to Pittsburgh instead of heading out back to the West Coast, where he enjoyed things with the Raiders, though I guess that's not technically the coast. That's how the Steelers should operate at wide receiver this offseason. The Steelers should look, if they want to win, I still think rebuilding is the best course of action for Pittsburgh. But if they intend on winning, learn from this Deebo Samuel trade, which is kind of setting the market for these veteran receivers, and go get yourself one of them. If the Steelers don't like the veteran options at quarterback, or even if they do, they'll likely be drafting a QB in Green Bay in April to throw to maybe those veteran receivers, or to throw to George Pickens and whoever they draft early in the draft. First rounder, late rounder, whatever it is, Pittsburgh's going to be prioritizing a quarterback at some point this offseason, and you got to think that also means the NFL draft. So let's talk with Cody Williams of Stacking the Box, college football podcast, and FanSided.com, and go through those quarterback rankings and who the Steelers should target as a mid-rounder, who the Steelers should be looking at in the first round, if they should be looking at anyone in the first round. We ranked all the guys that we think are draftable in the 2025 NFL draft, and got into some of the guys the Steelers may not have access to, but also some of the ones that the Steelers could be taking a mid-round flyer on. So without further ado, here's Cody Williams. All right, Cody, just before we started recording, you said something very interesting, and that's exactly where I want to start. You cover the NFL. You've done some mock drafts. You're very into this. You said you're into the Steelers situation right now. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting quarterback situation. You think there are a lot of ways that this could go wrong. Right. Lay it out for me.
So I think that, and part of this is definitely some of the buzz that we've heard. Like, we've heard that they like Jalen Milroe, and like I think that there's a lot of ways where the Jalen Milroe situation could go wrong. Specifically, if you bring back Justin Fields and like bring in Milroe as a type of mobility like backup to like develop him, I think you're setting yourself up for real failure there, because Justin Fields had a lot of problems as the Steelers quarterback last year. And I am much lower on Milroe than a lot of other people. I think that him leaving after this past season was a huge mistake. I think he should have taken an NIL deal and gone somewhere else other than Alabama. It's clear Kalen DeBoer didn't want him there. But right now, to me, he's a deep passer who can run really well. And outside of that, I don't see a whole lot of things. Like, I think his footwork is sloppy as can be. I think his reads are too quick. I think he moves out of them too quickly. And I think when he throws to intermediate and short parts of the field, I think he's highly inaccurate. He only has a fastball, and he's kind of like Wild Thing in Major League. He doesn't always know where that fastball is going. So, like, if you're setting Justin Fields, a guy who is still raw even at this point in his career, with Jalen Milroe, I think you're setting yourself up for failure there. I think there's also a situation where the Steelers reach for a quarterback at 21, whether that's Jackson Dart, who I don't think should be a first-round pick, whether that's, even reaching in the second round. Like, if you take someone like Will Howard, who looked awful at the combine, I don't like one of the worst combine performances I think we've seen from throwing to air, basically. I think there are a lot of situations where the Steelers could miscalculate value and also miscalculate the situation.
That's a great way to get us into my 2025 NFL draft quarterback rankings. How we're going to do this, I'm going to go through my rankings. I have about a top 8 because I feel like top 7. I have my top 10, but 7 that I want to talk about that I feel like the Steelers could be interested in. The top 2 are going to be gone. I still want to talk about them. I still think it's interesting. And as I mentioned, Cody, you're on this stuff as much as anybody. You watch as much college football as anybody. You have opinions on all these guys. So I'll go through my rankings, why I have the guys there, what I think, maybe their outlook is. And then, you can push back. You can say, well done. And we'll keep it moving through. So I want to start at number 1. It's Cam Ward. Mm-hmm. I think that's something that came out of the combine that I wasn't shocked, but I was shocked that this was the sentiment. Yeah. I agree with this sentiment. Mm-hmm. Cam Ward is number 1, and it's not a discussion between Ward and Sanders at number 1. It's a discussion about who's 2 and who's 3. Mm-hmm. And pretty much everyone is in on Cam Ward as number 1. Just a few notes I have, like, he bails too often. He wants to play backyard football more than you'd like. But at least he has the arm and the athleticism to pull that off, which I'll get into with a guy like Shedeur, who I think is like a B+ arm and a B+ athlete. I don't think Ward is an A+ Josh Allen athlete, right? But he can do it, right? He has the arm to throw back over the middle. He's going to do it more than you want, but so does Josh Allen. Like, so do the creators in the NFL that raise your ceiling. So I actually like that, and I like that he can pull it off. He wasn't excellent under pressure last year at Miami, but better pressure to sack rate than Shedeur and higher percentage of dropbacks in structure, meaning under 2.5 seconds, which I really like. I like to see how quarterbacks perform on those structured plays because, especially a fifth-year senior, there's so much, I'm older, I'm better, I can just create that you're not going to have in the NFL. Yeah. And that's something I see with Cam Ward. Not just a big arm. He's creative, even in the pocket, different arm slots, different arm angles, quick releases, excellent deep ball, and good touch. I think he's got good arm strength to drive in tight windows over the middle of the field, which you mentioned a guy like Milroe doesn't really have. And a lot of poise. Like at time he's bordering on being too lax. Yeah. But I like that. I want a guy who stays even, who stays calm. I loved his season at Miami. That team had a lot of flaws, and he overcame a ton of them. So what do you see with Cam Ward, and is he your number 1 QB in this class?
He is my number 1 QB, and I will say, like, one of the flaws he had to overcome was the defense, which was just dog water completely the entire year for Miami, a big problem, and it came back to bite them. But with Cam Ward, I agree with a lot of what you said. But one thing that I find interesting is you talk about the fifth-year senior stuff. He does not have a traditional fifth-year senior.
No. Like, walk us through the path if you want to.
Yeah. So you're talking about a guy who started at Incarnate Word, was heavily under-recruited. And at Incarnate Word, when you have an athlete, a guy who is this just rawly talented as Cam Ward is, they basically said, go out and be the hero. Every time, every drive, every play, it was Cam Ward, go do something cool. And he did it a lot at Incarnate Word, to be very clear. Then he goes to Wazoo, and it's kind of like a diet version of that. Like, there's a little bit more structure, but Wazoo does not run a traditional offense. Wazoo is not like trying to compete for national championships or anything. So it's still a lot of Cam Ward hero ball. And I think a lot of the shortcomings you see with Cam Ward are the remnants of that hero ball element that he was asked to play for so long. He still has that a little bit in his DNA. But I do think in Miami, he progressed from that. Like, he played less hero ball. He played more in structure. And a lot of the positives that you saw from him and that you just talked about, those are progressions progressions for Cam Ward. And so
Yeah.
with the talent that he has, I think that he, like those progressions, he's just going to keep making them. Now, I'm not saying like that means he's going to be immediately great in, week one of his rookie season. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there is going to be a learning curve, but this is a guy who has proven a lot throughout his college football career. And like when you get down to like the mentality of a draft pick, I want someone who's had to like prove people wrong throughout his entire college career. And so when you talk about that plus the talent this guy has, I'm a big believer in what he's going to be capable of.
Yeah, and this is a guy, like you said, he was a wing T quarterback out of high school. Like that's a reason he wasn't recruited. This is not, he didn't have the talent. He didn't really have the way to showcase it.
Right.
And you mentioned like he was free flowing. He was Cam Ward, do everything. I actually kind of liked the pairing with Cristobal because one of the criticisms of Cristobal was like, you had Justin Herbert for years and you're not letting him be Justin Herbert. And he definitely let Cam Ward be Cam Ward way more. He has more of an air raid coaching staff now to get in the college football nitty gritty stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think he tried to rein some of that in. And I think a year of that, when that's going to be one of the things he has to learn in the NFL, I think that's pretty helpful for a guy like Ward.
No, 100%. And like when you're talking about like, him holding onto the ball all along, him throwing over the middle, I like it's hard for me to not like have a little PTSD from Caleb Williams a year ago. Yeah. And like because like that was also a criticism of Caleb Williams and it hurt him with the Bears in his rookie season. However, when I watch Cam Ward hold onto the football, it feels like there's a purpose to it. Sometimes Caleb Williams holds onto the football and I'm just like, I'm not sure why why the football is still in your hands. Cam Ward, that's never really the case. Like, there's a reason the guys aren't open, or he's trying to get a guy more open, like, or he's trying to buy time. Like, it feels like there's a purpose with that. That's not saying it doesn't still need to be reined in, but it is something like I can build off of something where you're like working with a purpose as opposed to just running around.
Yeah, I really love that point, and it segues well into my number two. But before we get there, what do you see the ceiling being for Cam Ward? Is this potentially a top 10 NFL quarterback? Because I think that's where I am. I think I see a potential top 10 guy, but not a top 5 guy.
Yeah.
Where are you and why, if you don't think he could be a top 5 guy like I do, like I don't either, why?
So I see him kind of in basically the same. Like I would say, like I think his ceiling is probably that 8 to 12 range. Like I think that's where
I like that
you
a
would
lot.
want. I think that's where you would want him to end up in terms of like the NFL quarterback hierarchy. And I think that the one thing, like the things are gonna like, he does not have, like you mentioned, he doesn't have the Josh Allen athleticism. He doesn't have the biggest arm in the world. And so like I think it's really like, this sounds weird to say because I do think he's a great physical prospect, but like there are physical limitations in terms of like the elite of the elite in the NFL. He does not necessarily have that trump card that you talk about, like a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, a Patrick Mahomes. Like when you're talking about the best quarterbacks in the NFL, I'm not sure Cam Ward necessarily has that like, oh, Josh Allen can just truck 3 dudes running over the middle because he's 247 pounds. Like he doesn't have that to him. He doesn't have Lamar Jackson who can make you miss in a phone booth. He doesn't have that type of shiftiness. He doesn't have going back to Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, like the type of arm to get him out of any situation. Like those that aren't necessarily there. But I think like when you look at that, he's almost, to me, this is a weird, but I do watch a lot of Cowboys football as a Cowboys fan. He reminds me of like a more athletically gifted version of Dak Prescott. Like you remember young Dak Prescott coming out of Mississippi State when he had the athleticism and was using his legs. That's what Cam Ward really reminds me of. Yeah,
I like that a lot. And what you said made me think of, not to stay on Cam Ward too long because this is not a guy the Steelers have access to, but I just love this conversation. And he might be in the division with the Browns. So like this is worthwhile for Steelers fans to know. If he was in the 2015 draft or the 2012 draft, 10, 15 years ago, we would be talking about him as like kind of this mutant quarterback athlete that we don't really see ever, with the massive arm and with the crazy athleticism. And we just have so many freaks at the position right now in the NFL. I think that is why he can't be in the top 5. It's not so much about like things he does wrong. The top 5 is littered with these insane like super processors with insane athleticism. And I think he's like an A- at a lot of those. Right. And that'll give you a better than Kirk Cousins NFL quarterback. And I'm into that. And especially at the top of the draft where like maybe the Browns are going to get him or if the Titans decide to go quarterback.
No, 100%. And like, you can do it. Like you pass, you get good grades. You have a high GPA if you have a B plus or an A minus constantly.
Yeah.
Like you can win a lot of football games. And like, I think that whether it's the Giants, Titans, Browns, whoever takes Cam Ward, like if you put him in the right situation, like I'm hoping that the Giants trade up to number 1 and get Cam Ward with the number 1 pick, because like the idea of Cam Ward and Malik Neighbors playing together, like that's a combination that could work.
I'm into that.
Malik Neighbors is the type of elite talent that elevates the quarterback. Like it's all about how these guys fit and pair with what they're being put into.
Yeah. And we'll segue into Shedeur, because you mentioned with Cam Ward, when he leaves the pocket, there's a purpose. And there's a reason he's leaving the pocket. And I see you laughing now. And if you're watching on YouTube on the video, you see it as well. Sometimes that's not the case with our friend Shedeur Sanders.
Correct.
Sometimes he just decides he wants to go big game hunting, even if there's nothing to go big game hunting for. Like, even if it's not big game season. And he is going to bail out of the pocket. He is going to make those types of decisions that have limited Caleb Williams early in his career, even though I'm such a believer in Caleb Williams.
To be clear, I didn't mean that to be like Caleb Williams is a bust. I just meant
no,
it was a problem.
I definitely didn't take it that way.
Okay.
I don't think the listeners, Caleb Williams had flaws in the first year. He's going to be a good quarterback. I have faith in that. The question about Shedeur, right? Like it is his play style. Is that a default setting for Shedeur, or is that circumstantial because of the offensive line limitations and no run game in Boulder? I don't know how to answer that. I don't know that you can. Like, that's why there's so much uncertainty with the NFL draft process. But I will say, I learned a big lesson from the Kenny Pickett experience. The athleticism has to match the play style. And we hinted at this with Cam Ward, right? Pickett won with athleticism at Pitt. And suddenly he couldn't get outside the pocket. He couldn't spin out and beat a defensive end, because now the defensive end runs 4.5, not 4.9. And he couldn't break tackles in the open field. He couldn't do off-schedule stuff. Sanders is a better processor than Pickett. He's better on those in-structure downs, right, that I mentioned that I really value a lot. But he's not an elite athlete. If he ran at the combine, I don't think he would have run very well. And there are a lot of problematic habits. So I worry about how this translates.
Yeah. So you mentioned is it the construct of it, like a construct of his environment at Colorado, or is it I think it's a mix of the two, because like you said, I think you using the term habits is very important, because I do think most of this developed as a construct of Colorado. Like, I think that's where it resulted from, because you go back and you watch him at Jackson State, he wasn't necessarily doing all of this stuff because Jackson State had such a talent advantage in the FCS and in the HBCU leagues. Like, he didn't necessarily have to, buy time to try to make a big play. Yeah. In Colorado, he did develop some of these habits. And so it will, that's something that whatever team drafts him, whoever that is at the top of the draft, you're going to have to coach that. And I do think there is going to be more of a learning curve than there probably should be, because of those habits he's developed. Because I think Shedeur is far and away the best processor in this class. Like, I think Shedeur Sanders' processing ability gets overlooked and underrated, I guess is the best way to say it, just because of, the Colorado circus that comes with all of this. But Shedeur Sanders is a good football player and a smart football player with a high football IQ. And I think that while he does have bad habits to break, I'm still a believer in Shedeur just because of that football IQ. I think he's smart enough to recognize that and work on getting out of those habits and getting into the right habits. The draft, one of the reasons most people love the draft is because it's never just one thing. You can't just look at one piece of the picture and be like, well, this is why this is going to work, because there's so many factors that go into it. And so I think Shedeur is a really interesting test case with that, because he was in a situation that is unlike many things that we've seen in college football before, with A, how Colorado was constructed, and B, how quickly it was constructed, and how he dealt with that, but also how good he is at playing the quarterback position, but how he was forced to not be good in certain areas when you're talking about NFL draft evaluations.
And I said a lot of things that are negative in that because I have concerns. I think I have more concerns about Shedeur than you do. Yeah. And I think his destiny will ultimately rely upon where he ends up, which is the case for so many prospects.
Yeah.
But I think him more so than some others that you'd take in the top 5. There are guys, and I think Cam Ward is right on the edge of this, but probably one of them that can succeed despite their circumstances.
Yeah.
I don't know that Shedeur can do that, but he did in Colorado. Like, he was often on a team with Travis Hunter, the best player on the field. He is a damn good quarterback who created, despite a lot of faults on the offensive line and a lot of problems, and was dominant at times and made Colorado into a college football playoff contender. Like, obviously it expanded and that means something different, but it still means a lot that he was able to carry a program in its second year after winning. I think they won 2 games before Deion showed up in Boulder.
It might have been 1. I think it might have been 1.
It was bad. It was as bottom of the barrel as you could possibly get. And yes, Deion turned that around. And yes, there's a lot of Deion stuff. But a big reason Deion turned that around is because of his son. And Shedeur is a very good quarterback. I see him more top-end outcome 15 to 20 in the NFL, which is a valuable guy to take that can, stabilize some franchises that don't have it. Do you see a higher ceiling for Shedeur?
Not necessarily. I think there's a world where he cracks into like the 12, 15 range. You know who I really like in terms of career arc for him, because I see some of the same limitations? Baker Mayfield. Because Baker Mayfield came into the league similar to what you were talking about with like the Kenny Pickett problem. Like Baker Mayfield won a lot with his athleticism in college, got to the NFL and realized, I'm, barely 6 foot and don't really have this type of athleticism that I did when I was at Oklahoma. But Baker has figured out how to become a better processor, become a better quarterback. And Baker doesn't have the biggest arm. Like, I think there are a lot of similarities between him and what Shedeur Sanders, him and Shedeur Sanders, and what they could potentially do. But I have a little bit more faith in Shedeur to make those realizations quicker than I do Baker Mayfield, or than I did Baker Mayfield.
I like that comp a lot, and I like you giving us a comp. If you haven't for the other ones, I like you adding those in. So we'll jump to number 3, and this begins where the Steelers actually have access to these guys. And this also is a divergence from the common draft thought, the draft group think that happens in this time of year. It's also a divergence from, I came on Stacking the Box with you at the end of the season a lot, college football playoff. It is a divergence from anything you heard me say during those episodes. Quinn Ewers is my number 3 quarterback in the 2025 NFL
Josh.
draft.
That's my guy.
And I love that response. He had a torn oblique all year.
I know.
This doesn't feel like we knew this was maybe the case. And I think we talked about this heading to the semifinals or quarterfinals, something. He looked hurt. The ankle was bad. He had like a bionic ankle brace that nobody had ever seen before, that Laura Rutledge or whoever was on the sideline, Molly McGrath, was like showing us how this functions. And it showed. Like, the flaws and things I worried about with Quinn Ewers are directly related to your lack of like rotational ability and push off with your ankle. Everything floated. From about midway through the season when he missed time and Arch Mania began, every throw was just floating. And even in the red zone where you need to drive things in, Sark was trying to dial it up. So it was just some wheel route, throw it up in the corner, and Jaden Blue will go try to chase it down. And early in the season, that's not the guy I saw at all.
No.
That Michigan game is huge for me. I wrote after the Michigan game that Quinn Ewers was my QB1, and obviously that's subject to change. That was very early in the season. I think it was week 2. For the problems that Michigan had, that defense was still loaded. Wink Martindale was not Jesse Minter, but still tons of talent. And in the first half of that game in Ann Arbor, he carved Michigan up. He climbed in the pocket. I loved his awareness of where everything was, keeping his eyes down the field. He was able to throw off platform. And this is the highest rated high school quarterback ever.
Yeah.
He's got an arm.
Oh, yeah.
You didn't see it this year. he's got it there. If he's healthy, and I have big concerns about him staying healthy because that is not the only year that he was injury prone.
No.
And he's 209, 208, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But high-end outcome, I am super in on Quinn Ewers, and I would love the Steelers taking a second-round quarterbacks don't really exist because they get pushed up in the first, but a third-round flyer or even, a late second flyer on Quinn Ewers and let him get healthy, let him try to add some weight, see what this looks like because I'm in on Quinn.
So I've been in on Quinn for a very long time. And all to be clear, all of the concerns about his health and things of that nature are valid. Like, yes. I believe he was hurt 3 straight years, missed time in 3 straight years. And but the other thing to remember is this is still got a guy who's young. He reclassified and went to Ohio State at 17 years old. Like, this is a young guy. And so yes, he's been in college for a long time. Yes, he had some issues staying healthy, but when he was right, not only did we see him show a lot of positive signs, show the arm strength, show development in his processing ability, but we also saw him thrive in big games. Not just the Michigan game, the Alabama game a couple years ago. Absolutely carved them up and played a really good game, smart game, played within himself in a game where Texas was probably outmatched in that game, and he leveled the playing field and got Texas a win. I look at Quinn Ewers and I see a guy who has just had a lot of bad breaks, quite frankly. And I think that if you're confident in the health, which is again a big thing, but if you're confident in the health, this is a guy who checks all the boxes and you're going to be getting a depressed asset that is only going to appreciate. Yeah.
And what you mentioned with the injuries, right? That's the reason he's not a first round pick because there's just a ton of talent here. Maybe he would be a late first, whatever. But if everything went well for Quinn his last year at Texas and he stayed healthy, I think we're talking about a first round quarterback.
Yeah.
For many other reasons, but also because of that high school pedigree. And he made good on a lot of that. He won a lot of big games at Texas. I could see him fitting well with the Steelers, right? Things were very schemed up for Texas. Sark is one of the best play callers in the country, and it is very a play action heavy offense. But I see an NFL quarterback when I watch healthy Quinn Ewers, and I'm glad you're there. Is he your number 3?
He is my number 4, but it's 3 and 4. So I'm differing from the consensus because I have Shador and Cam Ward in their own tier, and then 3 and 4 I have in their own tier as well. And Ewers is in that tier at QB4. And I'll say this too. You talk about the injuries. If you watch just Quinn Ewers' body language at the end of the season, he was frustrated, man. Yeah. And it's because he did not have the ability that he knows is in the tank because he was hurt. You watch him in the SEC championship game. That looks like a dude who's just annoyed that he can't be the player that he knows he's capable of being.
Yeah. And he was still a fairly good player. I was very frustrated with Quinn at the end of the year.
Yeah. But if Quinn Ewers is healthy, Texas is probably the only team in the country that could have stopped Ohio State.
And they still almost did.
Exactly.
So I'm in on Quinn. He shot up my draft board. Once I saw that he played through a torn oblique all season, which we kind of knew. I was waiting for that to come out. Once it did, I was in. I put him above who I have at number 4, Jackson Dart. Is he your QB3?
Yeah, that's who I have at 3.
I'll let you go first on Jackson Dart if you have him higher than me. So I want to hear the positives with Dart.
So I think I'm actually going to start with the negative just because I know it's what everyone's going to say. He's an Ole Miss quarterback coming out of Lane Kiffin's system. And that has not been a profitable endeavor going to the NFL to this point. We have not seen it really.
Can you speak to that a little bit? What kind of the college-y nature of that offense is? I think we know, and I think it's parroted a lot, but could you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, no, of course. So I think that one of the big things is that it's a quick read offense. You're looking for your first read and then you're kind of out of structure there from that point. So you're not you don't really have to handle a whole lot of the mental things, at least historically. And I'll get to that point with Jackson Dart a little bit, but historically it's a quick read offense. It's also an offense that much like any veer and shoot or spread type offense, it utilizes the space and the wider hashes that are available to you in college. So when the field gets more compressed at the NFL level, that spacing is not there. And when you're not really trained and progressing in terms of your reads, that has a real problem. That creates more problems. And so it's just compounding problems. why I'm higher on Jackson Dart than I would have been on, say, a Matt Corral or anyone of that nature. I think Lane Kiffin asked Jackson Dart to do a whole hell of a lot more than he has a lot of previous quarterbacks. I think he asked him to go to his second read, and I think Jackson Dart was very good at it. And then also the other thing is, and it's not just, quick game, getting a slant or a screener out there. We saw Jackson Dart not just push the ball downfield, but push it to every level of the field. And I think one of the things that it wasn't necessarily on display this weekend at the combine when he was throwing, but he's really good in game at layering throws. Whether if he needs to layer it over the zone into the intermediate parts of the field, he throws a beautiful ball right where his receivers need it. There were a lot of times this year, and I don't think this has been the case very often at Ole Miss football. Jackson Dart was the one bailing out his receivers with good throws where his receivers were actually hindering him. They brought in Juice Wells. Juice Wells was abominable for the Ole Miss Rebels this past year. It was sad to see. And so you had Trey Harris, and when Trey Harris wasn't out there, it was a lot of question marks, and Jackson Dart really elevating that offense. I think this is a guy who I'm not sure you want him to start in his rookie season. I think that in terms of the mental processing, there is still some level to go that coming out of Ole Miss. But I think he is further along in that process than many Ole Miss quarterbacks before him. And I also think he is a more physically talented player because a lot of the times, and I think the reason Lane Kiffin probably gave him more responsibility in this offense than we've seen previously, I think he's just a more gifted passer than a lot of guys we've seen come through Lane Kiffin's offenses.
So with Dart, I kind of fell in love with him when I covered the Peach Bowl, the 2023 Peach Bowl between Penn State and Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Went down to Atlanta, and the Penn State defense was kind of a shell of itself, lost its coordinator. Manny Diaz went to Duke, and a lot of the secondary players were not there. But Dart just carved Penn State up. And Penn State was trying to bring a ton of pressure, and he was super poised, and he was getting the ball out quickly. He was trusting his receivers to win deep downfield and giving them a real chance.
Yeah.
I liked his game when he was a freshman at USC because of the toughness. I'm in on Dart, but not as a first-round quarterback. Would you?
No, I would not take Jackson Dart in the first round. And that's kind of why I clarified the tiers that I have there. Jackson Dart is a day two quarterback to me. Because if you're going to have to sit a quarterback a year, which I personally, ideally, you would like to sit Cam Ward and Shador, but I do think that they are better equipped to come in day one and at least have some sort of positive impact in starting them right away. Jackson Dart, I think it's the opposite of that. And I think it's also the same for Quinn Ewers and to some capacity, just because I think you need to get Quinn Ewers' body and head right, quite frankly.
Yeah. We'll go to another guy now. Do you have a comp for Dart?
For Dart, God, he's a tough one.
You don't have to pull one if you don't have one, but if you have something,
I don't have one locked and loaded. And frankly, he's a tough guy to comp because we don't have many guys who played in this offense in college that really translated to the NFL level. Yeah. So even similar offenses, we don't have a ton of track record for that. So it's really hard to find a comp, but he's also a unique player because his pocket passing looks like a traditional pocket passer, but then you have the rushing element. He is a good athlete. He's a very good athlete and also a warrior, like you mentioned. I don't know. It's not an easy comp because he pulls from so many buckets. Yeah,
he's a unique guy. Something that knocked him down to 4 for me was that Florida game. He was just trying to throw it away at the end, and those things happened.
He did throw it away.
And successfully threw it away at the end multiple times.
Yeah.
But that happens in college sometimes. So I don't know, maybe I'm over indexing on that one game, but for a guy who is in such a schemed up offense, I want to see what you do when you're down and you kind of don't have those levers to pull of motion and play action and whatnot. And it didn't look good. So I might be over indexing, but that's why he's at number 4 for me. Number 5, Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon, all-time leader in starts in college football and a lot of other statistical categories because he was a freshman in 2019, like I was as well. I've been out of college for quite a while now. Arm strength concerns for me are there. Others kind of disagree. I've actually heard some glowing reviews of Gabriel's arm. I kind of disagree with that. I think he's a really good deep ball thrower, but that's more of an accuracy skill to me than it is an arm strength skill.
Agreed. Thank you for saying that. Thank God.
Yes. I think people just go crazy with this guy hit a bunch of 20-plus yard throws. That's especially down the sideline, that's such an accuracy and a placement thing. And I thought Joe Burrow would have taught us that lesson, and we haven't learned it from him. There were really no turnovers for Gabriel except in the red zone, because that's when the windows get really tight. And I just don't think he was able to drive into those tight windows. But he's a quick processor. He's an accurate thrower. He has a ton of experience. He's very small. He's a little thicker, so he's not like Bryce Young. Yeah. But he's also not as thick as a Russell Wilson. So I don't know. He's somewhere in the middle, and he's not as athletic as Wilson. I could see him like actually starting right away if you weirdly needed him to, which could be an appeal for the Steelers. I don't think there's a very high ceiling. And for him, accuracy is just like, he is very accurate. He needs to be elite in the accuracy department, like 98th percentile accuracy. I think he's a starting NFL quarterback. If he's 94th percentile or something like that, small of a discrepancy, I think he's a career backup. So what is your read on Dillon Gabriel, and where do you have him ranked in this class?
So I have Dillon Gabriel as QB7, and a lot of it is because of the negatives that you're saying. And like, to me, I think the thing that worries me the most about Gabriel is because of his size, because of the lack of arm strength, because of the need to be as accurate as he needs to be, it feels like he would be banking on an outlier. And like, I think that's like, if I'm banking on an outlier, I'm going to take it on more physical traits. Like, I have Jalen Milroe ahead of him. I think Dillon Gabriel right now is a better quarterback than Jalen Milroe, but like not even close. But in terms of what Jalen Milroe could potentially be in a world where everything works out, the upside is so much higher. And like, I think that once you get out of my top two tiers with those four that we've already talked about before, you mentioned Gabriel, I think that you're really taking dart throws. Like, I'm not sure of any of these guys working out. And if I'm taking a dart throw, I'm going to take a dart throw. And I keep using the term dart throw. I need to stop because Jackson Dart is in this class and it confuses my brain a little bit. But, if you're going to take a big swing like that, I'm going to take it on traits. I'm going to take it on a Jalen Milroe, who is my QB5, or I'm going to take it on someone like Kyle McCord, who is my QB6. And I like Kyle McCord a lot because I think that, I think the perception of Kyle McCord is different than the player that Kyle McCord is because of what happened at Ohio State. Yeah. If you watch the Syracuse film, that's a guy who I think can play in the NFL. Now, he has a lot of things to work out. I think his ball placement is a bit erratic, which was one of the things that frustrated Ohio State fans. But in terms of arm talent, in terms of poise in the pocket, I think Kyle McCord has it. Dillon Gabriel has all these things, just with a lot more physical limitations. Yeah,
and it worries me a ton. I'm constantly wrestling with this. It's funny that you say the dart throw thing, because I've been talking about dart throws at quarterback for the Steelers since last offseason. That's how I described the signing of Russell Wilson. I think it's a good way to go about it, because unless you know and feel certain, just take dart throws until you can be certain. I actually think you're right that if you are taking those mid to late round dart throws, take them on the physical traits, and maybe you do strike oil. I will say, though, the late to mid-round quarterbacks that we've seen succeed recently haven't been toolsy guys.
That's true.
We're not talking about Joe Milton taking the NFL by storm next year, and that's just like such a layup one to throw out there. Right. But Brock Purdy, I don't know that he's going to get the contract he was going to maybe get, but could be a $40 million a year quarterback. He's a bit more toolsy than I think is perceived, but he's a processing guy. He's a veteran, very experienced guy. I'm so often indexing on the traits, and I'll just go right into Milroe right now. Like, I have a James Harden theory with Jalen Milroe that it's all threes and layups. Yeah. And if you can run the wheels off of him, those are your layups, and you take a bunch of deep shots and he hits, 40% of them, you have a weird offense that's going to have a lot of 3 and outs and be kind of ugly, but it could actually be statistically efficient. And I think we learned that at Alabama with Milroe. So I was very high on Milroe as a college quarterback, higher than most, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm I don't know. I'm trying to learn some of the lessons from Brock Purdy and guys like that, that maybe we do tend to overvalue those physical traits. So go into Milrow, if you will, or wherever you want to take that, because that wasn't a question. That was just a diatribe.
So I'll make two comments. First off, I'm a Brock Purdy hater, and I am too.
I am too, but he is a functional NFL quarterback, and if you're taking a 4th round pick on a guy and you get that, that's great value.
But I think the lesson I've learned with Brock Purdy is how much situation matters. Because if Brock Purdy, I think, was with 31 other coaches in the NFL, I don't think he's what Brock Purdy is. I'm about to get paid $50 to $60 million a year on a new contract. It's Kyle Shanahan. I think, I'm also a Bo Nix hater, and I don't think Bo Nix is as good if he's not in the Sean Payton offense. Totally it's agree. Funny, and that actually transitions in what I was about to say about Milrow is because Sean Payton set up the Bo Nix Broncos offense much like what you're describing with Jalen Milrow. 3s and layups, baby.
Yep.
Bo Nix had the highest deep passing rate, and people talked about his deep passing. I'm like, all they do is throw deep. Have you ever seen him throw over the middle of the field? No, they don't do it. And so I think Milrow, if he goes into the right system, could absolutely be the right guy. They're just so frankly, if you're looking at the Steelers, I don't think an Arthur Smith offense is going to be really advantageous for what Jalen Milrow is good at doing. I think that is a bad idea.
Yeah, and maybe that's shading my rankings a little bit. I actually totally agree with all of your points, and I am also a Brock Purdy and Bo Nix hater because I think you have to have these super tools to be one of the Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. I know that's a dumb super thing, but I also think paying a guy like Brock Purdy is the biggest mistake you can make in the NFL.
Yes, agreed.
Because it just puts you in purgatory. And that's probably who Dylan Gabriel would be on a second contract. But if you can get a guy who can be the 18th best quarterback in the NFL in a schemed up offense, and you know that by year 2, there's a lot of surplus value in that on a cheap contract. And I think, we're seeing the Commanders just traded for Deebo Samuel and only needed to give up a 5th round pick because they're just taking on money. And you have the ability to do that if you have a cheap quarterback. I would never pay Dylan Gabriel, but I think you could maybe squeeze something out of him on that rookie deal that would be enticing to me. So I'm trying to hold both things as true. I like the toolsy guys because I think that's how you actually win and how you win when you pay a quarterback. But when you're not paying them, I think you can get away with the schemed up guys.
And I think that, I may have Dylan Gabriel as QB7. I like him better for the Pittsburgh Steelers for those reasons that you're talking about than I would a Milrow, than I would a Kyle McCord, because I think you can insert Dylan Gabriel into an Arthur Smith offense, especially if they add another wide receiver outside of George Pickens. And I think that, and shore up the running game. I don't know what you're going to do with Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. Who the hell knows, because it's the Steelers and they operate by their own set of principles. But you get the pieces settled around Dylan Gabriel, and I think that could actually work because I think he's the type of quarterback that Arthur Smith wants, someone who's going to take care of the ball, someone who's not going to make a big mistake trying to make the big play. I think that Dylan Gabriel is the type of guy that would work really well for the Steelers in the situation that you're presenting.
Next guy on the list, Tyler Shuck, for me, is 7.
Okay.
And I'm kind of not into this at all. I don't really know that I like it very much. There's something there, but it was also a Jeff Brom offense. And I don't know that there's a play caller. He's probably not the best play caller in college football. I don't know there's a play caller I like more than Jeff Brom. I think fair. he's gonna make every quarterback work in his offense. Tyler Shuck worked in his offense. He also was Justin Herbert's backup at Oregon. He's been in college football forever and has not had the Dylan Gabriel is a college football legend career.
Yeah.
He's had you just learned how to say his name correctly and still a lot of people don't know how to say it career. I don't know. I don't have strong opinions on Tyler Shuck. I don't think he'll be an NFL quarterback. I just have a grab bag of guys at the end that I want to just hit on. Do you have any thoughts?
So Tyler Shuck, to me, I have him, I believe QB9. I have him lower, but a lot of that is age. Like the age just worries me. Like I don't know what the upside is at this point. His college career is basically like, what if JT Daniels' third transfer worked out? Like that's what Tyler Shuck's like career is basically at this point. And like there are tools there. And like he did have a really nice season with Louisville in Jeff Brom's offense this season. But at the same time, like is there really any upside to this? Like to me, Tyler Shuck is a guy you take in the 4th or 5th round and he bounces around the league as a backup for 10 years. Like I think he has the requisite tools to help an NFL team in practice, or if you're in a pinch spot and you need someone to come in and not ruin the game plan every week. Like I think that's his destiny. In terms of being an NFL starter, I can't quite get there.
Yeah, I don't really see much starting ability out of any of these guys at 8. I actually have Seth Hennigan out of Memphis.
Okay.
I just really I did a deep dive on some of the leading passers coming into the season from last season, and I watched a lot of Hennigan, and most of those guys who were the leading passers were Gabriel in like a veer and shoot, and Joey Aguilar, who was in a very play action heavy offense at App State.
Yeah.
And Hennigan was the one that I watched, and I was like, they're not helping him out that much. Like they're letting this dude figure it out, and he's manipulating linebackers, and he's throwing over the middle of the field, and he's getting to his stuff without play action or motion or whatever. I don't know. He's probably a backup, but I'm in on Seth Hennigan, and I hope he's like a draftable. I think he is a draftable player. I hope he gets drafted. And I think he would have like a moment at some point in the NFL, and then just physical limitations and whatnot. I don't see there being a ceiling or a starter. He's somebody I'm interested in. Do you have any Hennigan thoughts?
He's QB8 for me.
Yes.
He's very Gardner Minshew-y to me.
Yes.
That's who he reminds me of. Yeah. Like the career that Gardner Minshew has, if you're Seth Hennigan, you'd be happy with that, man. Like,
you'd be thrilled.
You start half the games in a season for a team that doesn't really have a certain quarterback situation. You bounce around and kind of provide a stable force. I think he's absolutely capable of that.
And I also, this is something I just thought of, Arthur Smith of FedEx Wealth.
Yes.
Is this correct?
Correct.
Memphis is funded
there we
NIL.
Go. Okay, yeah.
That's kind of how the Steelers draft. So they actually might do something.
Seth Hennigan, you are a Pittsburgh Steeler.
Yeah. Okay. Will Howard, I'm not into it all. I think but there are some high school quarterbacks that could have done somewhat well with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate. That is an absurd offense.
Yeah.
And Howard overcame some of the offensive line problems, but I also think Chip Kelly overcame a lot of the offensive line problems. I'm not into Will Howard at all. He is 9 on toughness and moxie, and like that's fun backup stuff to say. And then I have Kyle McCord at number 10. I will never be able to unsee the Pitt game. I know I'm over-indexing on that.
It was bad, though.
I will never be able to unsee it. And McCord had – you said he's not the same quarterback as he was at Ohio State, and that is definitely true. He had big problems with pressure on a super talented offense where you could just, there's a guy in my face. Marvin Harrison's down there somewhere. And like that didn't even work for him at Ohio State. So I'm kind of out on McCord more than you are. Do you have anyone you're excited about late in this 8, 9, 10 group?
Excited is a very relative term. At 10, I have Riley Leonard above Will Howard. I have Will Howard at 11 and Riley Leonard at 10. And I understand Riley Leonard's limitations as a passer, but that's also a dude who is just tough as nails and has figured it out every step of the way. Like he got Notre Dame to a national championship game. He made Duke football relevant. Like you can't underrate those things as a college football guy. And like I look at those things and there's something there, and I'm not sure what that translates to in the NFL if I'm being completely honest.
Tight end.
I mean, Taysom Hill, Riley Leonard, who knows what's about to happen. And honestly, maybe that is his future, and I think he'd probably be pretty damn good at it, frankly.
Yeah, I actually agree.
But like He's a guy who is going to be drafted and is going to be like NFL, like get at the combine. I would have loved to have been in Riley Leonard meetings with these coaches just because I'm sure coaches are fawning over this kid. Like he is everything you could possibly want in a football player and a guy who's going to be a leader in your locker room. I'm just not sure what that means as a quarterback. Like I just don't know how you get there.
Yeah, but that's worth being QB 10 in this class that isn't exactly loaded. So I'm into that. I love all of this. I love getting your opinions on these quarterbacks. The Steelers probably have to take one of them. Yep. So these are our thoughts on these guys, and I hope this is a good reference for everyone as we get through draft season. Thanks for joining me today, and giving me so much time to joke around about Tyler Shuck pronunciations and everything that we love to do as college football fans.
Absolutely, man. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually have a mock draft coming out on FanSided.com today, 3 rounds post-combine, so check that out on FanSided.com. And anytime you want to come talk, I don't know just quarterbacks, so anytime you want to talk draft stuff, well, I'm here for you, man.
Oh, I think you might be back on before the draft. I think I might be taking you up on that because this was a ton of fun. And I'll throw the link to that mock draft in the description of the episode. So everyone go check that out. Cody does amazing work over on FanSided.com. So make sure you go read that. Thanks for coming. Just fantastic stuff from Cody on the NFL draft and on all of those quarterbacks. I imagine he's going to be back and we're going to do another position group or maybe position needs for the Steelers, something as we get closer to the NFL draft. We're also getting closer to free agency, and I know that's something that Tommy and Shane are going to be covering on Wednesday. So make sure you subscribe to everything, especially on the YouTube for the Still Curtain podcast. We really appreciate your support there. We continue to grow this thing and we want to keep it hopping through the offseason. So draft, free agency, everything. Make sure you are subscribed to get a hold of, everything we want to give you. We're going to be creating content all the time. So make sure you're plugged in so you have access to it. I'm not done yet. That sounded like the start of a goodbye. Absolutely not done yet. I want to go through some of the players that the Steelers visited with at the combine. And I think Tommy is as good at this as anyone in Steelers media, tracking who the Steelers talk to, with whether it's at the combine or top 30 visits or all these different things, and sussing out how they draft based on those visits and those interactions. And he always does a great tracker. And so make sure you're following him on social media everywhere you can and following along on stillcurtain.com. He does much better than me, but there are lists out there of the 35 to 40-ish, I think it was 37 players that the Steelers visited with, either officially or unofficially with, in Indianapolis. These are the guys that jumped out to me as potential first-round picks that the Steelers visited with. That does not mean the Steelers' first rounder at number 21 will definitely come from this list of guys, but possibly. So I want to talk about them a little bit and then maybe mention a guy or two that, helped their draft stock at the combine that maybe I could see the Steelers being interested in. So here are the visits with potential first rounders at quarterback. They took more quarterback. I visited with more quarterbacks, but the one that may be a first round pick is Jackson Dart. You just heard all of my thoughts and all of Cody's thoughts on Dart. Don't have any more there. At running back, they visited with a big group of guys. I think the Steelers could and probably should draft 2 running backs in this class because this running back class is excellent. So much talent. No need whatsoever to talk about a contract with Najee Harris. That was a bad pick when it was made. Signing him to a contract would just further compound that issue. You can get a great running back in the first round, second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round, and seventh round of this draft. That's how many good ones there are legitimately. These are the 4 that they met with that I think could be first rounders. Ashton Jeanty will be a first rounder. Nearly set the all-time single season rushing record in college. Boise State running back. I'm just going to give a few thoughts on these guys. Like Jeanty is, to me, the epitome of contact balance. something that Alvin Kamara, that's kind of Kamara's superpower, just does not get knocked off his line. The first guy can never break him down. You got to wrap him up to get him down. That's Genty is a star. He also has breakaway speed. Fantastic football player. Najee Harris, when the Steelers took him in the first round, it was such a mistake because not just because of the value of drafting running backs, and I think the pendulum is swinging back on that now anyways, but it was a mistake because Najee wasn't the type of game-breaking talent that you should spend a first-round pick on at running back or at any other position. And we've certainly seen that he's been a wildly inefficient runner throughout his career. Genty, if he somehow slides to 21 and the Steelers do pull the trigger on that, I'm in on that move. That's not just reactionary to Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley having ridiculous seasons last year. Genty is a fantastic football player and would, to me, buoy the Steelers offense in a way they desperately need. And if you are bringing back Russell Wilson, you have his deep shots, but now you also have Genty to move the chains and create some explosive plays on the ground, which the Steelers are sorely lacking. I'd be super into that. Explosive plays. Omar Hampton out of North Carolina. Steelers also visited with him. He is another game breaker and fantastic talent. I love Hampton. I love Iowa's Caleb Johnson, who the Steelers also visited with. Big physical runner, but also breakaway speed. Like, all these guys have a combination of size and speed and physicality that you need to succeed in the NFL. And I think those three guys could certainly be bell cows for Arthur Smith. And that's something he wants. And Tomlin has always been attracted to, just a bell cow running back to be out there on all three downs. Travion Henderson out of Ohio State is not quite that. Steelers also visited with Henderson. He is more in the Jahmyr Gibbs role. Undersized guy, not a ton of tread, worn off those tires because he split time with Quinshon Judkins at Ohio State, who the Steelers also visited with and have shown interest in. And Judkins had a remarkable combine. But I think Henderson's the better back of the two. To me, he'd be a reach at 21, but not necessarily a reach at 30. So if the Steelers wanted to move back or something, I could be okay with that pick because they just need athletes. The Steelers need athletes. They need athleticism. They need to get younger on both sides of the ball and more athletic and faster because they just lack a lot of pop. Henderson would provide it. I love this running back class. Think there could be multiple taken by the Steelers. Think they probably should. And I even love Jaylen Warren. If they let him walk to draft two guys in this class, count me in. At wide receiver, maybe the position of most need, considering the George Pickens situation, which I don't even know what that means, but to me, that's just George Pickens being George Pickens and me being ready for the Steelers to move on from him. And the fact that there's nothing else behind Pickens. Matthew Golden and Emeka Egbuka were the two that the Steelers visited with that could be first rounders. They visited with more. Golden was the fastest receiver at the combine, 4.29, I believe. Give me some of that. Sign me up for some of that because he also has some size. He's not just a Calvin Austin type of player. He has size to win at the catch point. He was the best receiver for Texas and for Quinn Ewers at Texas this year. Really just continued to develop throughout the season. And with that type of speed, I think that's something the Steelers desperately need on the outside. And I think he'd pair pretty well with Pickens. While both are deep threats, they win in different ways. And I think you can create an interesting offense around those two. Egbuka, ideally, probably more of a slot, but I think he can win on the outside. Very smooth route runner, kind of a tactician, but he also has some size and he's a good separator. Egbuka is never going to be I wouldn't see him as a dominant, like, downfield receiver, but as a possession guy and a move the chains guy, I would love that for the Steelers as well. I think he's a really, really good football player, and he already was an excellent number 2 to Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State and to Marvin Harrison Jr. at Ohio State, just all these great guys, and he continued to be productive That's what the Steelers need with Pickens. He could be in the slot, could be outside. I like Igbuka. Tyler Warren at tight end. He's the only potential first-round tight end that they visited with, which is mostly just to say they didn't have an official visit with Colston Loveland. At least it was not reported. Yeah. I mean, of course, sign me up, but he's not gonna fall down that far. Even with Pat Freiermuth just getting paid, Tyler Warren is that much of a difference maker offensively that he would, if he's there at 21, it's almost a certainty he's the best offensive playmaker remaining on the board. So yeah, sign me up. Defensive line, Kenneth Grant out of Michigan and Derek Harmon out of Oregon are the two who are potential first rounders. Grant is a freaky athlete. And to get younger on the defensive line with a player that has that much upside would be a fantastic outcome of the first round. Cam Hayward was an all-pro, played like an all-pro all year. He's getting older. Eventually that cliff's going to come. And as the rest of the interior defensive line, aside from Keanu Benton, gets older, Grant could be a great option. Derek Harmon, a penetrator on the inside, more so kind of in the sense of, in the vein of a Javon Hargrave a little bit, in my opinion, who the Steelers could potentially be in the market for, as he's a free agent again for a reunion there. But the thought with an old school 3-4 defense is you want somebody who clogs up a lot of space on the interior. Hargrave was never that, so it was always a wonky fit with him at nose, I guess you would call it. While nose tackles don't really exist in the Casey Hampton sense anymore. Hargrave was always a penetrator and better as a 3 technique. Feel that way about Harmon, and I think he would work well next to Cameron Hayward, but I don't think 21. I think that's a bit of a reach for Harmon, in my opinion. And in the secondary, Jahdae Barron out of Texas and Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Barron, there are just concerns about size. He ran really well at the combine. The Steelers really need another corner opposite Joey Porter. It feels like they always box themselves into drafting for need instead of just drafting the best player available. And all of these potential first rounders that they visited with are at positions of need other than Tyler Warren. So that I don't love, because I do think the best draft strategy is to just draft the best player available, regardless of position. It looks like they're trying to fill a need again. And I'm okay with that. We'll see how free agency pans out, and there's a lot of time before the draft, but just an interesting list of guys that the Steelers could potentially be targeting and guys to keep an eye on. If you're a film junkie, you want to list the names to go watch, there you go. 2 names, one I already mentioned that stood out for me at the combine. Matthew Golden is the first. I mentioned he was the fastest receiver at the combine. I wasn't fully sold on him as a first rounder, but running 4.29 compared to 4.4, while that's so negligible, it is enough to say, okay, there actually is a lot of upside here for a guy that he had a weird trajectory at Texas where Isaiah Bond was supposed to be the number 1 this year after the Longhorns lost a lot of talented receivers like A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy from the year prior. And Golden just was the steady contributor all year. And by the end of the year, everyone realized, oh, this is actually the wide receiver 1 on this team. And he was very good in the college football playoff and in the postseason for the Longhorns. Running that 4.29 just kind of solidifies, yeah, he is actually that type of talent. So first round pick on Matthew Golden would feel good. And Nick Emmanwori, South Carolina safety, is the ultimate standout from the combine, just on the relative athletic scores that everyone loves. I think he scored a perfect 10. I believe he scored a perfect 10. 6'3", ran a 4.39, broad jump insane, vertical insane, just a physical explosive freak. Plays the safety position. I don't care. I just want the Steelers to get younger and more athletic. He's the type of guy that would have a lot of pop. That's why I wanted to bring him up. Maybe he isn't the perfect fit. I don't so much care. because I don't think the Steelers are one position away from winning a Super Bowl. The defense needs to be more athletic, and he would definitely help their relative athletic score on the defensive side. So that's just another name to follow as we head into draft season. And as I mentioned, we're heading next into free agency. I didn't touch on it very much. Free agency is going to open up. Tommy and Shane will certainly have you covered there. I wanted to do some combine stuff. I have a lot of background with the college football guys and the prospects, so that's where my focus was today. And as we get into free agency, we'll analyze all the moves the Steelers make. We know the holes that this team has and the little bit of money they have to spend. So it'll be very interesting to watch. That's why you got to like and subscribe and be there on Wednesday for Tommy and Shane's show. I'm really happy that I got to get back on the air this morning or this afternoon here after a bit of a hiatus following a long college football season, and just finally got to reset a little bit after the NFL playoffs. I'm back now. We're rolling through the off season, and I'm really excited to do it with you. So make sure to like and subscribe. And a big thank you, as always, to everyone with FanSided who helps get this fantastic program up on YouTube, up on Spotify, up on Apple Podcasts, everywhere you can get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe there. That'll do it for me. And until next week, have a great one, and go Steelers.